A plane full of passengers was 3 seconds away from a safe landing when every single light in the airport went dark. And the only person who could have prevented it was a 17-year-old boy who had just made the biggest mistake of his life. This is the story of how one moment of anger turned into a nightmare that almost killed 243 people. Before we dive in, what time are you listening? Where are you from? Drop a comment below and tell me. And please, like and subscribe for more videos like this. Jake Morrison was not a bad kid. That is what everyone said later. His teachers said he was quiet, respectful, got decent grades. His neighbor said he kept to himself, helped carry groceries, mowed lawns for extra cash. His mom said he was a good boy who just made one terrible choice. But on that Thursday night in March, none of that mattered. Because Jake was angry. Furious, actually. And when you are 17 and furious, sometimes you do things that make no sense. Jake worked part-time at Portland International Airport. Not in the terminals where passengers walked around with their suitcases and their coffee cups. He worked in the operations building, the place most travelers never see, where the real work happens. His job was simple. He was part of the maintenance crew. He mopped floors, emptied trash bins, cleaned break rooms. It was boring work, but it paid, and Jake needed the money. His mum was a single parent working 2 jobs just to keep their apartment. Jake wanted to help. So 4 nights a week, he put on his uniform, scanned his badge, and disappeared into the behind-the-scenes world of the airport. That Thursday started like any other shift. Jake clocked in at 6 in the evening. He grabbed his cleaning cart and his checklist. He made his way through the hallways that smelled like disinfectant and recycled air. He did his job. But something was different that night. Jake had been called into his supervisor's office that morning before school. Mr. Patterson, a man in his 50s with a permanent scowl and a voice like gravel. Patterson told Jake he was being let go, fired, not because of his work, Patterson said. Budget cuts. They were eliminating part-time positions. Jake would finish out the week, and that was it. No warning. No second chances. Just gone. Jake had stood there in that cramped office, his hands shaking, trying to hold it together. He asked if there was anything he could do, any way to keep the job. Patterson just shrugged, said he was sorry, but the decision was made, and that was that. Jake left the office feeling like the floor had disappeared beneath him. He thought about his mum, about the bills piling up on their kitchen table, about the college applications he had been filling out, the ones that asked how he planned to pay for tuition. This job was supposed to be the answer, and now it was gone. By the time his shift started that evening, the shock had turned into anger. Jake moved through his tasks like a robot, his mind churning with resentment. It was not fair. He had done everything right. He showed up on time. He worked hard. He never complained. And still, he was being tossed aside like garbage. He finished cleaning the break rooms by 8. He emptied the trash in the offices by 9. And then he found himself in a part of the building he did not usually visit, the electrical and systems control area. It was a restricted section, but Jake had access because maintenance crews needed to clean there once a week. He swiped his badge. The door clicked open, and Jake walked inside. The room was large, filled with panels and switches and screens displaying information he barely understood. This was where airport operations were controlled. Lighting systems, backup generators, communication networks, everything that kept the airport running smoothly. Jake had cleaned this room before, but he had never really paid attention to what was inside. Now, standing there alone, his anger boiling over, he looked around and something shifted in his mind. He thought about how easy it would be to cause a problem. Not a big one, just something small. Something that would make Patterson's night a little harder. Something that would make them all realize that getting rid of Jake Morrison was a mistake. He walked over to one of the main control panels. There were labels on everything. Runway lighting, terminal power, emergency systems. Jake stared at the switches, his heart pounding. He was not thinking clearly. He was not thinking at all, really. He was just angry. So angry that his hands moved before his brain could stop them. He reached out and flipped a switch, then another, and another. He did not know what most of them controlled. He just wanted to cause a disruption, to make a statement, to feel like he had some kind of power in a situation where he had none. The lights in the room flickered. Jake froze. He heard a distant alarm start to wail, and then he realized what he had done. He had not just turned off lights in an office or a hallway. He had shut down major systems, airport systems. Jake's stomach dropped. He frantically started flipping switches back, trying to undo what he had just done, but nothing was responding the way it should. The screens were flashing error messages. The alarms were getting louder, and Jake knew with a sickening certainty that he had made a catastrophic mistake. He ran out of the room, his badge still dangling from his belt, his mind racing. He had to tell someone. He had to fix this. But before he could find anyone, the entire airport plunged into darkness. The main terminal went black. The runway lights disappeared. The control tower lost half of its systems. Backup generators kicked in for some areas, but not all. And in that moment, Flight 729 was on final approach. 243 passengers and crew descending toward the runway, expecting to see the lights that would guide them safely to the ground. But those lights were gone. The pilot of Flight 729 was a veteran with 23 years of experience. Captain Linda Hayes. She had landed planes in storms, in fog, in situations that would have terrified most people. But she had never landed a plane in complete darkness. When the runway lights disappeared, she thought it was a technical glitch. She radioed the tower immediately, asking for confirmation. The tower responded, panic evident in the controller's voice. They had lost runway lighting. They had lost ground systems. They were working on restoring power, but they needed time. Captain Hayes did not have time. She was 3 miles out, descending at standard rate, her plane full of passengers who had no idea what was happening. She could try to abort the landing, pull up, circle around, and wait for the lights to come back. But that would burn fuel, and if the power did not come back quickly, she would have to divert to another airport. Or she could trust her instruments, trust her training, and attempt a landing in the dark. Hayes made the decision in seconds. She was going to land. She told her co-pilot to prepare for a visual-less approach. She told the flight attendants to prepare the cabin for an emergency landing. And she focused every ounce of her skill and experience on bringing that plane down safely. Inside the terminal, chaos erupted. Passengers waiting for flights were confused and frightened. Airport staff were scrambling to figure out what had happened. Emergency protocols were activated, And somewhere in the operations building, Jake Morrison was standing in a hallway, frozen with terror, realizing that people might die because of what he had done. He ran toward the control room where he knew the senior operations team would be. He burst through the door, breathless, his voice shaking. He told them it was him. He had flipped the switches. He had caused the blackout. The room went silent. Every person turned to stare at him. A man Jake did not recognize, someone high up in airport management, stepped forward. His face was red with fury and fear. He demanded to know exactly which switches Jake had touched. Jake tried to remember, but his mind was blank with panic. He stammered something about the electrical panel, about not knowing what he was doing, about just wanting to cause a small problem. The man cursed and grabbed a radio. He started barking orders, sending engineers to the control room, trying to restore power as quickly as possible. But it was not quick enough. Flight 729 was seconds from touchdown. Captain Hayes was flying blind, guided only by her instruments and her instincts. The plane descended through the night, the runway invisible below, the airport a dark void. The passengers in the cabin were silent, sensing something was wrong. Hayes could feel the ground approaching. Her co-pilot called out altitude. 500 feet, 400, 300. The plane was dropping fast, too fast, but Hayes had no visual reference to adjust. 200 feet. She pulled back on the controls, trying to level out. 100 feet. And then, with a lurch that made every passenger gasp, the wheels touched. The ground dot the landing was rough. The plane bounced once, hard, then slammed back down onto the runway. Hayes could not see where she was on the tarmac. She could not see if she was lined up correctly. She hit the brakes, reversed the engines, and prayed she was going straight. The plane skidded, veering slightly to the left. Hayes corrected, fighting the controls. They were slowing down, but she had no idea how much runway was left. For a terrifying moment, it seemed like they might run out of space, might crash into something they could not see. But then the plane shuddered to a stop. The engines went quiet, and for a few seconds, nobody moved. Then the passengers started clapping. They thought it was just a hard landing. They had no idea how close they had come to disaster. Captain Hayes sat in the cockpit, her hands shaking, her heart pounding so hard she thought she might pass out. Her co-pilot was pale, staring straight ahead. They had just done the impossible. They had landed a commercial airliner in total darkness. And everyone had survived. Back in the operations building, power was being restored section by section. The engineers had figured out which systems Jake had disabled and were bringing them back online. The runway lights flickered on, illuminating the plane that had just landed. Sitting crooked on the tarmac, but intact, Jake was in a security office. Now, surrounded by airport police and federal agents, he was not being yelled at anymore. The yelling had stopped when they realized the plane had landed safely. Now they were just staring at him, trying to understand how a 17-year-old maintenance worker had almost caused a catastrophic disaster. Jake sat there, his head in his hands, tears streaming down his face. He kept saying he was sorry, over and over. Sorry, sorry, sorry. But sorry did not change what had happened. Sorry did not erase the fact that 243 people had nearly died because he was angry about losing a job. The investigation took weeks. The FAA got involved. The airport reviewed every security protocol. Jake was arrested and charged with multiple felonies: reckless endangerment, interfering with airport operations. His face was all over the news. The boy who turned off the lights. The teen who almost killed a plane full of people. His mum cried when she saw him in court. She told him she still loved him, but she could not understand why he had done it. Jake could not understand it either. He tried to explain the anger, the frustration, the feeling of being powerless, but none of it made sense now. None of it justified what he had done. Captain Hayes was interviewed by every major news outlet. She was called a hero, and she was. Her skill and composure had saved lives. But when reporters asked her about Jake, about the boy who had caused the blackout, Hayes said something that surprised everyone. She said she felt sorry for him, not because he did not deserve consequences. He did, but because she understood how one bad decision, made in a moment of emotion, could destroy everything. She said she hoped he would learn from this, that he would find a way to make amends, that he would spend the rest of his life trying to be better. Jake was sentenced to 3 years in a juvenile facility, followed by 5 years of probation. He lost his chance at college, at least for now. He lost any hope of a normal teenage life, but he also gained something: perspective. Sitting in that cell, Jake thought about Captain Hayes every single day, about the passengers who had no idea their lives were in danger, about his mum who was working even harder now to pay for his legal fees. He thought about the moment he reached for those switches and how easy it had been to make the worst choice of his life. When Jake was released, at age 20, he started speaking at schools, telling his story, warning other kids about the consequences of letting anger control their actions. He talked about how one moment of rage had almost killed hundreds of people, how it had destroyed his future, how it had hurt everyone he cared about. Some people listened. Some people rolled their eyes and dismissed him as just another cautionary tale. But Jake kept talking, because if he could stop even one person from making the same mistake, maybe it would mean something. Maybe it would be a step toward redemption. Captain Hayes never met Jake face to face, but years later, she sent him a letter. In it, she wrote that she had forgiven him, not because what he did was okay. It was not. But because holding on to anger and blame would not change the past. She told him to use his second chance wisely, to prove that people are more than their worst moments. Jake keeps that letter with him everywhere he goes. It is folded and worn, the creases deep from being opened and read so many times. He is 25 now. He works at a community center, helping at-risk teenagers find jobs and stay out of trouble. He will never work in an airport again. That door is closed forever. But he has found another way to make a difference. And every single day, he thinks about the plane that was seconds from touchdown when he turned the lights off. About how lucky everyone was that Captain Hayes was the one flying that night. About how easily it all could have ended in tragedy. People ask Jake if he thinks he is paid for what he did. He always says no. He does not think there is a way to fully pay for almost killing 243 people, but he can spend his life trying. He can make sure his story serves as a warning. He can help others avoid the mistakes he made. And maybe, just maybe, that is enough. Because in the end, we all have moments where we make choices we cannot take back. The question is not whether we make mistakes. The question is what we do. Afterward, do we let those mistakes define us? Or do we find a way to turn them into something meaningful? Jake is still figuring that out. And so, probably, are we all. So if you like this video, please like and subscribe for more videos like this.